Hey everyone, welcome back to Meta Talks, part of the Metaverse Times podcast network. Today we have a very, very special guest because of what happened yesterday, and then also a few other things. A Hall of Famer, by the way. I just learned about this, but
Oh my
Renji
gosh.
from Immersed, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Super glad to be here.
I know he was just showing me his plaque that he just received last week from one of his universities. So that's incredible. I'm actually like embarrassed of the school that I went to. So I hope they never send me a plaque.
Yeah. It was Georgia. So I went to Emory for undergrad, or that's not Emory for undergrad, and then Georgia Tech for grad school. And I was sharing with Daniel that I was confused because I haven't done a ton yet because I feel like I'm pretty young. But they said that out of 16,000 people, I was selected. So I was like, dude, that's a huge honor, man. So I flew out there and I received the award and I gave a little 2-minute speech. It was awkward because everyone there was wearing like tuxedos and junk, and I was wearing a t-shirt and jeans. I was like, oh man, how am I the guy up here right now? But
Did it say
yeah,
immersed?
yeah. It didn't say immersed. It said, I think it said like resurgence is like another shirt that I have. But
Okay. It would have been cool if it said, I mean, then it would have made sense. But I
I
think
know.
like what Steve Jobs was like, jeans and t-shirt, right? Or something like that. Only the
Yeah,
same every day.
yeah. Same thing
So
with
then
Zuckerberg as well. Yeah.
so don't even worry about it. No, it's interesting you bring this up because this came up in conversation a few days ago around like how people are judged as entrepreneurs and how it was like, okay, if you receive funding, it was like you're on a next level than somebody who bootstrapped, right? Or what you
Mhm.
said, if you exit your company, that means like you're on a different
You're
level.
accomplished. Yeah.
Yeah, you're like more accomplished than someone that didn't exit their company. So if I exit my company for like $100, but I still exited my company, like my point though is like I was just talking to someone around this how like we get judged, which I think
Yeah.
is it's tough as not entrepreneurship is already hard. You were saying like I mean you
Yeah.
can start a business, it can be successful, and then a business could fade away. We've seen this even with huge Toys R Us, like big companies. But what are your
Yeah.
thoughts there on that?
Yeah, it's funny because this is mainly based on the not just the VC world, but also just the general, even unaccredited investor world, right? When someone says, "Oh snap!" Like he exited for 30 million, and like he's worth like half that because he had half the company, and like it's 15 million, and it's like, but then you might still be running a company that's now worth 500 or 700 million, and you just don't have your exit yet. And you might be having way more impact, but people don't give a crap about that because technically I'm still getting paid, like a less than a six-figure salary right now because we're still a startup, right? So all that to say, like, it kind of sucks to have to really fight through the noise, but I think the founders who do the best job, just staying laser focused, blinders on, just accomplish your mission. In the end, whether it be selling it or IPOing, even Zuckerberg, he still hasn't sold Facebook, right? He IPO'd, so he sold shares in it. And so, now he's kind of successful and people kind of use him. But it's also hard. I don't blame the masses too much, mainly because it's hard to tell who is going to be the one that kind of endures to the end, right? It's kind of hard to know who's going to go the distance and ultimately be able to have some sort of payout that they could then reinvest into the world as a reward for all the hard work. So, I don't think there's a single founder out there who, I don't think there's a single founder of a high growth venture backed tech startup who is just like, I just want this to be my lifestyle business. Like, because tech startups are hard, they suck. There are easier ways to make money. So,
Yeah, so in my opinion, then Zuckerberg has not accomplished anything until he sells his company. He is not successful. He's only worth
not at all, man.
top like five, most wealthy people on the planet. But he is not. You know what?
Yeah.
Oh, Elon Musk sold like one. I think he sold a few companies. So I guess
Yeah. He sold
no,
PayPal,
you know what?
Zip2, and yeah.
You're right. Jeff Bezos is not very successful because I don't know if he's even sold a company.
No, he just, IPO'd.
He just IPO'd. He just made like a few hundred billion. But no, so I would love to
Yeah.
jump in because yesterday, obviously, people might be hearing this at different times. So yesterday might be a different day for them. But yesterday, our time, there was something really incredible that happened with Meta. And I'd love to dive in on how that's going to impact Immersed in your world. But why don't you just quickly, oh, you have something to show. Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, I had to. I hid it yesterday because people were coming to check out some of the office furniture to purchase. We're actually moving into a larger office, and so we're selling off some of our furniture. So I had to hide this thing. It's the Meta Quest Pro. I mean, it's awesome. It's the thing I've been working in. I've had to keep it silent for a year. They gave me this thing a year ago. So this is kind of one of the initial early developer kit versions. It's pretty. I mean, the hardware form factor, it looks quite identical to the final one, except for this is kind of just a prototype type plastic, but Yeah, it's pretty insane.
That's amazing. Can you tell everyone what it is? Because people, not everyone can see what we're doing.
Yeah.
And then
Mhm.
also, can you share what is the experience using it? Because I'm very excited. I've been using, the previous model now for the last
Mhm.
year or so, and I can't wait to try out something new.
Yeah. So Meta announced yesterday at Meta Connect, which is Facebook slash Meta's annual developer conference, or just sort of their hardware product reveal annual conference that they have. They showed off the world's next generation of VR headsets. Like, this thing is way thinner. Like, look how small that is compared to the Oculus Quest. Yo, this thing is a dinosaur. So, like, I don't know if I can hold these two things up at the same time, but it's not even a comparison, man. It's legit like a fifth of the size. It's not even close. However, this is more of a consumer device. It's kind of something that you can get out to the masses. This one is more of a professional device that's meant for people who want to take their work seriously. It's not a gaming device, though you can play games on it, and it actually is better performance than the other one. But this is mainly a professional device. And it's funny because Immersed, the startup that I started, Immersed.com, is the website. We are essentially partnered with the AR VR tech giants on virtual reality offices. According to a couple of the employees at Meta, they mentioned that Immersed is actually the only VR app that people use 40 to 50 hours a week every week in VR. There just isn't even a second VR app that does that. So they actually featured Immersed at Meta Connect yesterday, which was awesome because we had a ton of eyeballs on our stuff. My Twitter is still blowing up right now. And so I had to put my phone on do not disturb. I still blowing up, even with the minimizations that Apple tries to put in there. So it's still blowing up, but it's awesome, man. Like, I had a couple of VCs blow me up this morning too, saying, "So Zuckerberg essentially made a headset for Immersed." And I was like, "Hey, I'll let the I'll let the audience be the judge of that." But they're like, "All right, so when can we write a check?" And so it's a good feeling.
This is the time. This is the time to be an entrepreneur. I mean, it's in tech
Yeah.
and VR, because I know you guys started, obviously a few years ago, correct?
Yeah, in 2017. Like, back then, we were on. So the first version of Immerse was on a Google Cardboard. That literally that one right
I
there.
remember
And
that. I remember
yeah,
that.
it was this cardboard thing that was like $15 on Amazon Prime. You open it up, you put your cell phone in here. It has two plastic lenses, and you can kind of see kind of what the virtual world looks like. No one actually used this thing to actually be strapped on their head for however many hours a week. Which, by the way, for those of you listening, like, Immersed, essentially, it's software that you download to your laptop and your headset. It's one of the top apps on the Oculus Store. It ultimately allows you to connect your headset to your laptop. It spawns 5 virtual screens. You can then take your laptop and your headset to your couch or your porch, or if you're on an airplane, you have 5 screens with you at all times. But also, you could have your coworkers in that space. You could multi-screen share. You could whiteboard. You could quite literally have that portably with you at all times. And so, the latest hardware really, you just can't see pixels. Like, it's like now all of your screens are virtualized, and you don't have to sit at just your desk, right, kind of staring at a wall, but instead, or a cubicle or whatever it is. But now you can be in these really cool, compelling environments. And honestly, it just makes everyone who uses the product way more productive. We've onboarded hundreds of thousands of users at this point, but the ones that consistently use it for work are on the order of tens of thousands. And so we've been, back in 2017, first, on the Google Cardboard, then the Samsung Gear VR, Google Daydream, Oculus Go. You got the Quest One. We actually did port over to the Lenovo Mirage Solo. It just looked cool, but it didn't really compute well. But then obviously the Quest 2, and then now launching on October 25th, which is 13 days from now. This is going to be coming out on the Meta Quest Pro. So
Yeah, it reminds me. A few years ago, we helped a spa, like a med spa, create what we call the virtual reality facial, and I
mm,
trademarked it. What we did is, this is like 5 years ago. It was with that headset you just had, that like cardboard one. We put the phone in
yeah,
there, so while somebody was getting like a treatment, they were actually going through like a VR, and it was like relaxing. And it's kind of funny. Like, we were too early. We were way too early. No one ever got it, but it was
yeah,
cool. It was cool. I remember, it brings up memories. But yeah, no. So this is
yeah.
incredible. I mean, 40 to 50 hours a week in a VR. I mean, that's like, I would think that's almost
Yeah. I
unheard.
mean, yeah, well, it blows my mind, especially for the early adopters on the previous headsets that used it, years ago. We're still working in a VR 40, 50 hours a week. I mean, Time Magazine wrote an article on it the beginning of this year, I believe. Fortune, Wired, Forbes, all these sort of different publications have sort of covered our different users and also covered Immerse in regards to how are people wearing this thing for 40, 50 hours a week. Which, by the way, they're not wearing it for 8 hours straight. They usually have like 2 to 4 hour sessions, just like how you do in front of your physical monitors. You get some work done, you leave, go take a break, come back, same thing. They put on the headset, they work for a couple hours, leave, come back, put it back on. And it adds up to 40, 50 hours a week because it's been crazy to see how users without their headset on, they've almost become programmed to believe they are less productive when they don't have it on. And so we've sort of created these interesting hooked mechanisms that really sort of show users like, hey, if you're using this product, this actually does bring you value. You have way more screen real estate. You can be in these sort of virtual cafes as well, where you're working in VR alongside random people all around the world who are also just trying to get work done. You're not collaborating or necessarily speaking unless you unmute yourself, but people oftentimes just have kind of the virtual headphones on and they're just getting their work done. So it's been really cool to see just cohorts of people almost like using Immerse to retrain the human brain away from this sort of TikTok, instant gratification, microwave type world. But instead, how do we retrain people to use technology to become more productive again? And so it's been really cool to see people just starting to really adopt this thing, man. So yeah, really excited.
So can you see a world, and I know a lot of people had to go back to the office. A lot of people don't want to go back to the office. Can you see a world where this could be a full replacement for people that not having to go back to their office?
Yeah, so this actually is a kind of happy compromise for companies who want people to get back to the office, but their employees don't want to go back. It kind of allows hybrid work or remote work teams to be able to still have kind of an in-person office experience for the remote hybrid teams, essentially in a virtual metaverse headquarters, right? So essentially this is what it looks like for kind of full pass. I don't know if you see it on my phone. As soon as I put on the headset, I'm in my office with my virtual screens. The flickers because I'm filming with my iPhone. But it's pretty mind blowing. As soon as you put the headset on, you have all your screens. The VR version of that, it's quite literally you're just in an immersive sort of really cool headquarters, whatever you want to make it, and you actually feel like you're physically there. And the cool thing is you're working side by side with your remote coworkers, and you feel like they're literally there. Like when an avatar gets too close to you, it feels kind of uncomfortable. Like that shows you there's some level of telepresence there that really is registering in your mind. And let alone, I don't know if you saw Mark Zuckerberg's photorealistic codec avatars. That junk is mind blowing. He was like showing his 3D avatar and he's showing how they changed the lighting live in kind of Unreal Engine. And it was just like, it was mind blowing, man. It's starting to really hit me hard how this is quite literally becoming a Ready Player One type world. But Immerse is more focused on the workforce. I know Zuckerberg has pitches around, surfing in VR and, playing basketball in VR. And for me, I'm not as big of a, entertainment in VR type person. I'm more, hey, how do I use this technology to be productive? And at the end of the workday, take off the headset, be back with my family and my friends. But at the same time, there's also use cases where, if kids and their grandparents live in different states, they could watch movies together in VR, sitting side by side multiple times a week if they want. And then obviously, a couple of times a year, you get to actually go fly and see them and actually share a meal with them. But VR allows you to do the more kind of frequent touch points, which you just can't get access to in the real world.
So if you have the headset and you're at the virtual office and you look next to you and you have like your office mate, can you start communicating with them? Is there a level where, because I think that's where some of these companies, they see value in people like meeting together and bonding. And then, having, I see some of these virtual spaces where it's like looking down, like it's like a 2-dimensional, like little character, which to me doesn't feel the same. So, if I'm sitting here and I can see the next person, they look, hyper realistic individual, and we're still having that bonding level, we can go and have a conversation. Is that where you seeing is that currently, can you do that right now? Or if not, how far off in the future do you see that?
Are you talking about just being able to like sit with someone and talk and communicate with them and see body language and things like that? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes. Let's say like you have the VR on and you're in an office. Can you see other people sitting around? And then can you communicate?
Yeah. So all that stuff, it's funny because that stuff's been out for a couple of years. So the way it works is the new headset has eye and face tracking. So you quite literally can make eye contact in VR now, which is pretty insane. It's crazy. You can't even do that with Zoom, right? Because like, I don't know if you're looking at me or you're looking at yourself or whatever on the screen. Because when I look at the camera, sure, but when I look at the camera, I don't see you. So we can't actually make eye contact. Whereas in VR, because it's just tracking our eyes, when I look at your virtual eyes and you're looking at my virtual eyes, we're quite literally like locking eyes from thousands of miles away. It's insane. Uh, and Zuckerberg was actually showing at Meta Connect yesterday, like the full face tracking, like he was doing whatever with his face. He was now able to jump, and so he actually tracked his legs and his hands and everything. So you have full telepresence now with this new headset. With the previous headset, with the Quest 2, it did not have eye and face tracking. You can't fit all of that in a cheap form factor, or this thing was like $300 back then. And so because you can't have all those cameras and all that type of stuff for that inexpensive of a price, they essentially would have the avatars using essentially some sort of sentiment analysis, natural language processing, as far as whenever your audio stream comes through based on the sentiment, what it thinks, like it tries to recreate the facial expression. Is actually pretty convincing. So I can't really tell that you're not paying attention or you are. So if you're like looking down at your phone, your headset's up like this, you're like this and like doing something, it looks like I'm looking at you in VR, but I'm really on my phone. Whereas with the new headset, it actually does do eye tracking, face tracking. So we're actually needing to create something in VR called facial mute. And so ultimately where it then reverts back to kind of the AI type stuff, because if I need to respond to a message, or for in more kind of desperate situations, if I'm like exhausted for a meeting, I don't want this thing tracking me yawning in VR, right? Like I want them to think I'm not tired and I'm paying attention, but I need a facial mute, and then I do my yawn and then unmute again, just so I can hide my yawns.
We know it's. I remember I used to have quite a bit of employees in a corporate job, and when we would do meetings, especially the bigger meetings, it was easier because a lot of language is body language, so it's easier in a meeting to judge. Like you're saying, if half the room is yawning, then I need to adjust. But I think that the almost difficulty part is like if things are almost like too perfect, it might even make almost some challenges, or we're going to have to adapt as human beings, to
100%.
not being able to read a lot of that body language. But at the same time, it's way better than, like you said, like Zoom, because I think I'm always looking at myself. I think everyone else is also looking at themselves. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. I mean, I think people care about how they care about how they present themselves, right? And so, like, think about a world where on our Zoom meetings, it becomes socially acceptable to just wear your shirt and then you're probably wearing like shorts. But eventually, imagine your society does that for a generation or two, and that's the way that people do things. It wouldn't surprise me. Some people accidentally at some point, like legit go out in public with like a normal shirt and like basketball shorts to like a business meeting, and they didn't realize like, oh, crap. And so like it actually becomes wired into, so there are pros and cons for sure. Like in person, some people like, they learn manners, which is good. The part that sucks is they oftentimes are very slow to adopt more efficient ways of working because they're so used to being dependent on other people being physically present. Such as, I remember back in some of my previous jobs, I would have some coworkers who were coders who, if Renji wasn't around, they weren't really able to get as much work done because they were really dependent on me and my presence there. They weren't ever kind of thrown out into the real world on their own. And to be real, like because they were essentially being handheld, coddled, whatever, they were able to sort of glean off of a lot of the productivity of like me coming up with the architecture, and then I give them the small pieces and I do the hard parts. But in a world where we're all remote and everyone's based off of their own productivity, you can't be productive with kind of just like people walking up to your desk and be like, hey, can you help me with this real quick? Like if we're all working from home, people just won't be able to as easily to get away with that or be able to do that because I'm busy doing my work while they're doing theirs. So I think there's pros and cons to each. And I think that as society evolves, the hope is to take as much of the good and leave as much of the bad. So I think the cool thing with this becoming sort of a digitized type world is you get to kind of pick and choose which aspects you do recreate in the virtual world. Because if there are things like water cooler talk that your company does not want your employees to engage in, imagine if that was a button you could just turn off and it prevents people from just like killing time, playing ping pong all the time instead of coding, right? Like that's what a lot of my previous jobs were. Like we just turn off the ping pong table like certain hours during the day, and we say, hey guys, like, obviously we're still a company. We need to be productive. The ping pong table has a queue of people who are allowed to, the virtual ping pong table has a queue of people who are able to do stuff, and it's only during these certain hours. Obviously there's the counter argument of, well, then you start losing flexibility and blah, blah. And I'm like, well, then I guess you probably need a different job because your employer doesn't want that. They're paying your paycheck. So.
No, that's true. We were actually, we were just discussing with, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Amaze VR, who did the Hottyverse.
I've heard of them. Yeah.
And so they're focused on live events. And I thought it was fascinating because it was like everyone gets a front row seat to every concert, VIP. So there's something, I know you're focused on the, the enterprise and the work, which we already know majority of our life is actually spent working. So we might as well have.
Actually, there's more coming, but go on. Yeah.
And so there's so much I think that can be done with VR. now that all these things, like you're saying, I was thinking, like, now that you bring this up, I mean, I can imagine being at like a concert or maybe meeting a celebrity, and maybe, obviously they're not there, but you get to lock eyes with them, you get to communicate with them. I mean, obviously, you have like deep fake and all these, like, I see these like kind of clones that people are making of celebrities, that they're signing off on it, of course, but this stuff is wild. I didn't even think about that, and how, I mean, shoot, we can have your best friend might be, a big celebrity in the virtual
Yeah.
space. You might not want to have friends at all anymore.
Yeah, it's funny because I've met several famous TikTokers, and it's funny because they have a lot of what's the phrase, like sure, people can talk about how social media has made things unhealthy for some people, and technology's made things unhealthy for people, whatever. They care too much about themselves, very impressionable, very kind of people pleasing type people, whatever. What's been interesting is a lot of the famous TikTokers I've met, who are famous on TikTok but not in the real world, quote unquote, like they are more normal than some of the celebrities I've met. Some of the celebrities I've met, it's almost like the in-person human type glorification that they've received. It gets them to a certain level of pride, and they're like very arrogant. But when it comes to TikTok, obviously you still have some of those people who are like that. But I've met at least more, as law of averages, whatever, blanket statements. I've met more who are like, because they're kind of abstracted away of the idea that they legit have millions of eyeballs per video. Like, think about if a kid on TikTok was given millions of people in a massive, super mega stadium every single day. What would that would do to them? The level of arrogance, the level of like self glorification, things like that. Like, I think the cool thing is social media has kind of abstracted some of that away, to the point where it allows the famous people, quote unquote, to just be a little bit more down to earth. So, I mean, there's pros and cons. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, I'm really, I don't want to say I'm scared. I'm actually scared and excited, but I really look at how relationships are going to be changed. Not just, obviously friendships, like I was mentioning. If you could create or have, whether it's a bot or maybe a person in a virtual space, you could have the perfect friends. You could create the perfect friends. But not only that, I'm really thinking about relationships. So, like spouse, dating, now that it's getting more and more, I think Meta, even, I don't know if they just purchased or they're purchasing, a haptic feedback company. So I'm thinking, like, if you can feel, you can touch, you can see, I'm sure like one day they'll have smell. If you can do that, I mean, I don't know if people,
Yeah.
like, almost, why would they go and have a relationship with a human being, like, face to
Yeah.
face? It's going to be
Yeah.
I'm really interested to see how this will change and morph. Especially, I mean, with, like, you're talking about, let's say you love this TikToker and you want to marry that person, and they have like a virtual clone that you can actually marry. I don't know. Will you go and marry someone who's, I guess, in more real life? I don't know if you will.
It's funny because there are versions of this that already exist, right? Like, it's funny because it's almost socially awkward to now go up to a person and ask them on a date. Like, you have to swipe right on Tinder now. Like, that's like the way, or Hinge or whatever, use Bumble, whatever you use. Like, you almost have to use an app now because it's almost awkward to go up to, like, because people be like, "Who are you, creep? I didn't meet you online." And it's like, whereas literally, I remember like quite literally about 10 years ago, if you met anyone through eHarmony or whatever, people made fun of you. And so it's so crazy. Like, and it's also kind of sad. Like, so I met my wife back in 2014, and I remember fast. Then we got married after a couple of years, and fast forward to, I think, 2019. That's when I started hearing people saying, like, "Dude, I don't feel like asking them. It's kind of awkward, isn't it?" I was like, "Why is it awkward? Isn't that the way people do things?" Like, no, today's world, we use the app, bro. Like, we don't, and that's years ago. And so it's obviously only become more and more to that. So I'll be real. I remember telling one of my friends, I was like, "Yo, I feel sorry for y'all because doing this in person, like, it was just easier because you learn more about them like in person than you do on the way that they want to via the way they want to present themselves on your phone." So likewise, when it comes to this metaverse, it's going to be even worse, right? Now you can fake how you look, and so you don't know if you're being catfished or what. And so I'm sure they're going to be viral, quote unquote, metaverse dating apps that require true identity, right? So if you have, I'm sure there's going to be kind of the fantastical types that will, like, some sort of utopia, whatever, create whatever body, face, whatever you want, voice, whatever. And I'm sure those apps are going to exist, like VR chat and others. But I'm sure there's also going to be, the world's first like real version of metaverse where, because Zuckerberg actually talks about how on the new headsets, for certain types of content ratings, they're going to require true identity. So you will not be able to fake someone's identity, right? So if you're in a fantastical world or kind of a virtual world where identity or anonymity, and identity is not as important, anonymity is more of a prominent thing. Sure, you can almost expect to be catfished. But if there's like a say there's an app called Real Dating or something in VR, they actually will be tracking your specific face, and you cannot put on an avatar. You legit have to be yourself. So that won't surprise me if that becomes a real thing.
Well, I guess it's like put your best was it your best foot forward. This would be like put your best face forward. Because
Yeah.
like now, I guess I mean I never really use dating apps, but now I would imagine that you're always seeing what people want you to see. Like that's almost like the issue is like you only
Yeah.
see in the beginning what somebody wants you to see, and then you start realizing that's not necessarily who they are. Where you meet someone in person, they're going to try and of course, be their best person, but you see their flaws,
Yeah.
you see how they look, you can really judge. So it's very interesting. And
Well,
then
the hearts behind that haven't really changed. Meaning, way back when people already wanted to present who they wanted to be, it's just the barrier to do that for more people. It was harder. Meaning, you can only do so much when you're in person, right? I'm sure there's like under your shirt, if you want to hide that you're a little overweight, you can put those little things and like kind of really kind of make your waist skinny or whatever. Like there's ways you can hide it in the real world, but then
makeup.
things like social media, yeah, made it a little bit easier. Where it's like, okay, now you can only show certain angles how you want, but then in the virtual world now, you can legit do anything. And so I think no matter what technology looks like, you're always going to have people who want to just show a certain version of themselves. And then you have some people who quite literally do not give a crap, right? Like I'm sure Gary Vee has the money to be able to get Botox and whatever else he wants to do, but he literally quite literally doesn't care, right? So for him, because his heart behind the scenes is like, you just get my real self. That's the type of stuff he pushes on social media. And I'm sure there are for sure aspects that like we haven't seen of Gary Vee, but he talks about true authenticity and things like that. It's just technology is the true enabler is kind of the problem.
So are you seeing with these enterprise companies, are they having people use avatars or their real face, or how does that work in more of a business work environment?
Yeah, I mean, so the current version, photorealistic avatars aren't available yet. That's something that will be coming out. So I'm sure companies for sure are going to be opting into the content rating of photorealistic avatars, or they're called codec avatars. So CODEC, I think it's just like kind of the way the video codec works for filming your face and transcribing it into essentially a photorealistic avatar. I'm sure in professional settings, it's going to be almost required in most professional settings. But don't be surprised if over the course of time, companies kind of brag about, oh, our company culture is you can, be whoever you want to be and like try to figure out ways to be the cool company that like attracts. And I just feel like that's a nightmare. Like I think it's gonna get out of hand because I want to be a robot to work every day and like or be a dog every day at work. It's like it's not super productive. And so if I, however, require my employees to be their photorealistic self, then yeah, it doesn't really matter where you live. I can employ anyone anywhere around the world and still trust that they are who they say they are. And so I think that's just going to be a really important thing because in the professional world, at the end of the day, the bottom line kind of matters in order for your company to continue thriving. Whereas in a lot of the entertainment type spaces, you can have content ratings where it's like you can just be whoever you want, and there it doesn't really matter, right? So all that to say, in current applications, oftentimes companies desire for their employees to try to recreate this photorealistic experience. It's not photorealistic, but what they do is they almost like ask you, hey, can you like make your avatar look like you? And can you make sure to not like wear a cowboy hat in a professional meeting? It's just like, just be a normal professional.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think that's you bring up a really interesting point. I can't wait to see this. I need like personally, I want to experience it, but yeah, so many people now work for companies and every company employs people all around the world. I mean, everything is so global that it's really amazing how you can bring all these people from around the world together to working in an environment where we're having a similar experience. Because obviously, if in the past, like if I work for a major tech company and they offer all these cool things, and I work in a different state or different country, I'm like, oh, I wish I could be there, and it looks like so much fun. Now it's like, okay, we're all having the same experience. I think it could also drive even for companies to get even better people in other places too, right? Because it could be hard. A lot of people now they want to. It's not just about money. It's about the culture, the experience of working there. So people can actually really compete for jobs, for labor from all around the world, and being able to offer and say, hey, you can have the same experience or culture for a company that's based in San Francisco if you're in the Philippines, for example, or if you're in Malaysia, which I think is pretty incredible. So do these companies, are you seeing then, are they shipping like VR headsets around the world? Or I guess are the VR headsets, can you buy them everywhere? I'm not even sure.
So, I mean, yeah, it depends on what's available at the time. So, for example, like this new Pico headset. So, ByteDance, aka TikTok, they came out with their new headset right before Meta came out with theirs, and it's actually very high quality, very thin, like a super sleek device. It's only available in China and the EU right now, and so eventually next year it's going to come to the US. So, all that to say, like, I guess it just depends on the type of hardware that you want. Whereas Meta's headsets are actually not allowed in China, so I guess if you have employees in China, you just would not be able to. You would have to ship them a certain type of hardware. One thing I've been noticing is when it comes to things like compensation and things like that, there are definitely employees who are like, "Hey, yeah, but like Netflix offered me this," and I'm like, "Yeah, but you're like in a random third world country, and if you get paid that, you were literally the king of that third world country." It's like, and so it's whereas if they lived in San Francisco, it's kind of like, all right, well, just to be able to buy food, you need to make at least six figures, like minimum. Even at that, you're probably below average, and so it's been interesting to see how kind of this work from home or work, yeah, like remote work first type culture has really kind of even changed economic standards. And so companies are going to have to, because if it's just, oh, who offers the most cash, Netflix, Fang, right? Just, Facebook, Apple, whoever, they're all going to have to, they're going to be the leaders. They're going to be the ones who can afford the most. And thus startups just wouldn't be able to afford people. So they'd essentially have to have, less experienced type talent work at those startups, which is, it just creates this system that sends the world's best talent more and more towards the tech giants. It does make the tech giants even more competitive. And so companies are going to have to find creative ways to be more compelling to people other than just cash, right? Like, and we do that very intentionally at Immerse, for example. Like we have a salary cap. People have legit like gotten paid 600K plus at other companies and came to Immerse for like a 100K salary. Legit, that's like an 85% pay cut. And they're mainly focused on the mission, right? Like they realize, okay, Immersed is a very compelling company because we're positioned in this next generation of computing that's about to come out with all the tech giants. We're the top rated app in the Oculus store. Like this is a team that has a founder mentality that care more about the equity than the cash. Like it's a very, we essentially could not and will not compete with the tech giants in regards to compensation. Like for us on the equity side, yes, but not on the cash side. So all I have to say, companies are gonna have to find other ways than like, oh, unlimited PTO and like, we'll pay for your vacations and like, weird sort of ways, and find out what is their unique DNA that makes them attractive to the right types of hires, especially as this remote first type culture levels the playing field. Like ultimately gives all companies access to global talent, especially when AR, VR becomes almost a way for us to have metaverse type virtual headquarters. It'll allow us to really have access to really any company in the world. And so we get to sort of, pick where do we want to work. And also the employers have to figure out ways, how do we market ourselves to the right candidates also?
I really
like regardless of location. Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy.
No, it makes sense. I really think that this will be the biggest economic impact in our lifetimes. Just all these
Yeah.
technologies, like you're saying, all these technologies merging as one. But not only that, you have access, because I'm, thinking of beginning phases of the internet, even social media. A lot of countries around the world didn't even have internet. They're just getting
Yeah.
high speed internet. So, or some don't even have it. But with Elon Musk, I know they're building out Starlink. Yep,
Yeah.
in a lot of parts of Asia. So and Europe and Africa. It's really incredible. You have, I think, just my personal opinion is this will be a game changer. And like you mentioned, companies can actually save money by going to certain places, still getting top talent, but the people there, that could be more, like they could make more in a month than they would have made sometimes in a lifetime or a year before.
Yeah.
Which
It's
is
crazy.
It's crazy. But no, congratulations though, by the way, yesterday with Meta and the conference, and just how much Immerse is getting. So can you share with everyone though, like how they can get in touch with you? I know it's immerse.com, but Renji, this has been fantastic. But please share with everyone, how can they get in touch with you, the company?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, feel free to shoot me an email, renji@immerse.com. Also, I'm on pretty much most of the socials. So I'm on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Renji the Joy. Also, we are doing, like, a lot of people have just been hitting us up because historically Immerse has done a couple of different crowdfunding campaigns. So we actually broke a couple of world records back in summer 2020. Immerse was the world's fastest crowdfunding campaign in regards to raising $2 million in 2 days. And then fast forward 8 months, we raised $8 million in 2 weeks. And so a lot of people kind of looked up our history and they're like, hey, how do I get involved with this? Because it looks like this thing's taking off. There's a way we can kind of invest. So we're actually not doing crowdfunding campaigns moving forward. We actually are having to raise larger rounds, make this a little more manageable with venture capital firms. However, if people do have ways they want to get involved, I would say obviously check out immerse.com's website. We are kind of shifting our viewpoint and our vision. I don't know if shifting is the right word, more evolving and broadening our vision in regards to, we're not just focused on virtual reality offices, but now that people work full-time in VR, people actually want to also be able to build their businesses in the metaverse and employ people in this metaverse and transact goods and services in the metaverse. And so Immerse is putting certain economic pillars in place, like digital currency, digital ownership, virtual real estate, things like that. And we're partnered with Polygon and Republic Crypto, some of the world's top Web3 companies, to kind of get the world's economy into this metaverse. And so if you want to get involved with a lot of that, take a look at immerse.com/metaverse. There's a lot of information about how you can get involved. We're actually starting to release our first virtual real estate plots in virtual Manhattan. I did kind of a initial kind of, I guess maybe call it private. I just posted on Instagram and Twitter. And that first virtual property drop made 900K in like at launch. And it was the #1 NFT, utility NFT on OpenSea at launch. And so you feel free to take a look at some of that stuff if you want to really get involved with this metaverse and acquire, virtual real estate and things like that. Take a look at that stuff. I know a lot of people are like, well, what does that even mean? Like, this is, fake or whatever. It's like, well, I mean, just as much as you care about a blue check mark on social media, right? Like, that is a digital asset, or your follower base or your content that you push or whatever it is. Likewise, as the world becomes more and more digitized, your physical assets and your digital assets at some point will become more one-to-one than you think it will. So when it comes to things like more and more companies working in this metaverse, we want them to be able to essentially stake their claim in our virtual Manhattan, build their businesses, have their virtual headquarters. Maybe, college campuses have their virtual campus. People are already doing that right now. Virtual concert venues, things like that. As I was mentioning to you earlier before, like, Immerse is doing a lot more than just virtual offices. We're quite literally just trying to get the world's economy into this metaverse. So take a look at immerse.com/metaverse. We talk a lot about that. We are doing a mint next week for this next batch of virtual properties. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to shoot me an email, renji@immerse.com, or email vproperty@immerse.com as well. I'll respond there too. So yeah, thanks for
it's
having me on.
amazing how you're getting people involved, and they have it. Like, I mean, I didn't realize all this stuff last year. That's incredible with the crowdfunding. So it's great that you're allowing people to get involved, and they can be a part of the history. I'm sorry, history. They can be part of the future. Making history. So check out Immersed, immersed.com, immersed.com. Reach out to Renji. Check that out. Can't wait to be a part of it. Renji, thank you again. This has been fantastic. We'll have to come back maybe in a few weeks, a few months. I'd love to hear an update. I feel like you and I could just have like a 3-hour conversation.
For sure. Yeah, it'd be fun. I'm down.
Thanks, Renji.